Good morning, my dear students. Today we are going to talk about Chapter 2, but first let's revise Chapter 1. We said before that one day Miss Betsy Trotwood went to David Copperfield's house to meet Clara. When Peggotty opened the door, Miss Betsy entered and she began to talk with Clara. When she knew that Clara is pregnant, she hoped the baby to be a girl and said that if the baby is a girl, she will send her to school and educate her well. But after that, when the doctor came, he told her that the baby is a boy, so she left the house angrily and she didn't return back. After that, they named the baby David Copperfield. After 6 years, Clara decided to get married, so she got married to Mr. Murdstone, and they decided to send David to Yarmouth to have a holiday with Peggotty and her family. And on their way home, Peggotty told David that his mother got married to Mr. Murdstone, so he got very angry, and when he reached home, he went to his room and cried a lot. Then Mr. Murdstone began to threaten David to obey his orders or he will hit him like the dog. That's all for chapter 1. So let's begin chapter 2. But let's see our new characters. Number 1, Mr. Barkis. Mr. Barkis was a driver who took David to the hotel before the school. After that, Mr. Mill. Mr. Mill, he was a student at Salim School who collected David to school. Number 3, Mr. Crickle. Mr. Crickle is the headmaster at Mr. Salim School. After that, Tommy Truddles, one of the two friends for David. Tommy Truddles again, he is the luckiest boy at the school and he became David's friend. After that, James Steerforth, he is one of the oldest boys at the school and he had a strong character, he was the youngest one at school. So David liked him very much. Let's begin our new chapter. We said before that Mr. Murdstone was a bad person. He treated David badly and he threatened David to obey his orders. So David had a miserable life at this school, at this house. After his mother's marriage, he tried to learn his lessons, but he couldn't because he was afraid of Mr. Murdstone. So Mr. Murdstone decided to hit him very hard. But one day, while Mr. Murdstone was hitting David in his room, David bit Mr. Murdstone's hand, so Mr. Murdstone got very angry and he locked David up in his room and he decided to send him to a boarding school. David was very angry and Peggotty went upstairs to tell him about this. So David asked Peggotty to write a letter to her brother, Mr. Daniel Peggotty, Ham, and Emily to tell him that he wasn't bad as Mr. Murdstone thought. On the next day, a man called Mr. Barkis came to take David to school. He was the driver of the cart and he was a red-faced man. When he saw Peggotty in the street, he told David to write her a letter telling her that Barkis is willing. And they went to the hotel and then to the school. So David went to Salim School in London. When he arrived at the school was deserted because David went there during the holiday and all the boys were on their holidays. At this school, he met Mr. Mill, and we said that Mr. Mill is the teacher at the school who collected David to this school. He met him and they waited for Mr. Crickle. Mr. Crickle was the head teacher at this school. Mr. Crickle was a cruel man and he has a strong character. He used to beat the boys with his heavy stick. So David's life at this school was a miserable one because he was afraid of Mr. Crickle and his heavy stick. So he had two friends at this school, Mr. Tommy Truddles and Steerforth, he liked them very much, and this was the only thing which made him happy at this school. But David at this school has to wear a sign, and the words "Be careful, he bites" were written in this sign, so David was very angry. But one day, when David returned home, he found that his mother had new baby and she was very tired, and then after that she died. Let's see our questions today. Number one, how was David's life after his mother's marriage? We said that his life was a miserable one. So he had a miserable life. Number two, why couldn't David learn his lessons? David couldn't learn his lessons because Mr. Murdstone was very bad one and he was afraid of Mr. Murdstone. Number three, what did Mr. Murdstone do to David when David didn't learn his lessons? He hit him very hard. Number four, why was David locked up in his room? He was locked up in his room because David bit Mr. Murdstone's hand while he was hitting him in his room. Number five, what news did Bigotty tell David? She told him that they were going to send him away to a boarding school. Number six, what did David ask Bigotty to do before leaving the house and going to school? He asked her to write a letter to her brother, Mr. Daniel Bigotty, Ham, and Emily, telling them that he wasn't a bad one or a bad person as Mr. Murdstone thought. Number seven, describe Mr. Parks. We said that he was the driver of the car who took David to his school, and he was a large faced man or a large red faced man. Number eight, what boarding school did David attend in London? He went to Salim School in London. Why was the London school deserted? We said before that because David went there during the holiday and all the boys were on a holiday. Number 10, how did Mr. Crecker run the school? We said that he was a cruel man, so he had a strong character and he used to beat the boys with his heavy stick. Number 11, how was David's life at Salim School? We said that it was a bad one. He had a miserable life at the school because he was afraid of Mr. Crickle and his stick. But his two friends, Tommy Truddles and Steerforth, were the only thing that made him happy. The last one, what happened to David's mother? We said that when he returned home, he found his mother had a new baby, but she was very tired and thin, and after that, she died. Let's see our comments. Number one, don't beat me. I have tried to learn. Really, I have, sir. These words were said by David to Mr. Murdstone when they were in David's room and he was hitting him because David couldn't learn his lessons. After that, they are going to send you away to a boarding school. We said that these words were said by Bigotty to David when she came to his room to tell him that they will send him to a school in London. Number four, Barks is willing. It was the message which Mr. Barks asked David to send to Bigotty in a letter. The last one, be careful, he bites. These words were written on the sign which David had to wear every day in the London school. That's all. Thank you.